you could take a moment and just click on that, I would thank you very much. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Liz Pereira. She is a guest speaker today. She is the Climate Policy Director with the Sierra Club, where she works on climate change and energy policy and resilience and adaptation issues. She came to the Sierra Club from the Union of Concerned Scientists, where she was a senior representative on climate change and energy policy issues, and also authored a report series called Climate Change and Your Health, documenting increases in heat waves, ozone pollution, and storm intensity in a warming world. Before coming to the Union of Concerned Scientists, she worked with the NRDC as a climate policy specialist and ICF consulting in the climate and energy practice. And she likes to dive into climate and health science as well as energy planning and policy. She holds a Master's of Environmental Management from Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies and a Master of Public Health from the University of New York School of Public Health. Without further ado, here is Liz Pereira. Liz, are you on? Just a moment to clear the gap. Bueller, can you unmute Liz?
Okay, Liz, are you there?
Liz is there, but she's saying she needs to be unmuted.
Yeah, she's unmuted.
Liz, maybe you're muted on your phone. Doesn't look like it.
Okay, Liz, I just sent you an audio pin, so you should be able to unmute yourself now.
There we go.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, great. I'm not sure what happened there. It seemed to drop my call. I am delighted to be with all of you here tonight, and I really want to thank Kelly and Catherine and Barb and all of our friends at PSR for inviting me to speak. And I'm just thrilled that all of you are really excited, as I am, to work on climate change and health in the coming year, and specifically work on the Clean Power Plan, which I believe is one of the best opportunities to bring on clean energy that we've had in the country for a very long time. And I can't see the current presentation. If you could just tell me which slide that we're on, that would be great. Are we on my first slide?
We're actually showing your screen right now, so are you able to pull it up?
Oh, no, I thought Kelly was going to pull those slides into your presentation. So you should share with Kelly. Why don't I go ahead and just get started in the meantime? And Kelly, can you pull up those slides?
Yeah, they are pulled up on my screen. Julie, can you hear me?
Can you guys pull up Kelly's screen?
Okay.
Great. And as you know, the President in June of 2013 came out with his Climate Action Plan. laying out a path for the United States to be on to really make significant action on climate change and prepare the United States for the impacts of climate change. Part of that climate action plan that he announced in June of 2013, the real cornerstone of that plan was the Clean Power Plan. And as we're pulling the slides up here on the screen, I will just say there are a number of different phases to the Clean Power Plan, and we are currently most focused on the standards for existing power plants, because that is where most of the carbon pollution is coming from in the country. There are about 40% of the emissions of carbon pollution come from power plants. And so existing power plants are key to really bending the curve and reducing our emissions of carbon. The proposed rule to address existing power plants was announced in June of 2014. And as Catherine discussed, it's projected to achieve 30% reductions from the power sector by 2030 from 2005 levels. Now, it does this by establishing state-specific carbon intensity targets through the application of 4 building blocks, all relative to a 2012 emission rate. So if you think about it, it basically takes a picture of your state's energy generation in 2012 and then applies certain building blocks to evaluate the carbon reductions that are possible in your state. So each target is actually specific to the state. And then what it does is it really puts the power in the state's hands, as Catherine discussed. It provides flexibility to states to develop their own plans using measures like the building blocks, but not specifically the building blocks. And that really enables your states to take the lead and decide what is the best plan for them. And Kelly, if you could just move forward with the next slide there. And so the overall outcomes for the Clean Power Plan, EPA has estimated $93 billion in climate and public health benefits. And that's really because of the incredible co-benefits that are expected from pollution reduction that will, because of the fact that they're reducing carbon, there's also criteria pollutants that will be reduced at the same time. They estimate 25% less nitrogen oxides and sulfur dioxides and an 8% decrease in electricity bills. They also, as part of this, estimate a major decrease in the health impacts associated with that air pollution. Next slide. So the best system of emission reduction that the EPA evaluated, and this is when I was talking about those building blocks that they applied to each of your states when they took that snapshot of what your energy generation was in 2012. The first building block is power plant efficiency improvements. So they first thought, well, you can make each of your power plants can actually become a little more efficient. And Sierra Club has actually estimated that EPA's estimate that each of your power plants can become about 6% more efficient is actually an underestimate. And we have estimated that you could probably get up to 10% efficiency at power plants. So that's the first building block. The second building block is a move away from high-emitting power sources. And you'll see in this slide we use a word that's called dispatch. That basically just means which plants turn on and turn off. The EPA, in order to do this, estimated that existing and under construction natural gas combined cycle units would be able to ramp up to a 70% capacity factor, which basically means they just were able to turn on those natural gas plants more often. Now, as we've already discussed, Sierra Club and the Physicians for Social Responsibility do not think we should be using more gas. We all know that that is not an appropriate way to be addressing carbon and addressing climate change. It is not a bridge fuel, and that there are major implications for fracking in this country. So what Sierra Club actually evaluated is that that increase of natural gas usage could also be seen as a proxy for coal retirements. And that's basically because most of these power plants that have been coming offline over the last many years, and we've been retiring more coal every year since 2010, those coal power plants coming offline also decrease the amount of carbon emissions in your state. So while EPA said that each state could increase the amount of gas use they use, Sierra Club is saying, no, we can do that by retiring coal power plants instead. The third building block is use more zero and low emitting power. Now, EPA says that we can basically turn on more clean energy generation. Now, EPA's approach included things like nuclear generation, and also included the use of more renewable generation in this building block. The Sierra Club has actually estimated and modeled that we don't need to be using more nuclear generation, and we share PSR and other groups' concerns that nuclear is not a way forward and has significant concerns in terms of waste. And therefore, we actually think that renewable energy generation and this next building block, which is to use more electricity more efficiently, really can be what we rely on for most of the emission reductions in the clean power plan. And I'm going to tell you how that we can do that. Next slide. EPA actually estimated that we could increase demand-side energy efficiency to about 1.5% per year annually. And I'm going to tell you in some of the slides below how we can do a lot better than that. So I've already mentioned that states really can lead the way, and that states don't need to follow EPA's building block prescription specifically, and we don't want them to. We want each state to really do all of this work of reducing carbon emissions by maximizing renewables and energy efficiency. And EPA is also taking comment on whether states can do things outside of the measures in these building blocks, such as types of efficiency on transmission and things like that. EPA is also evaluating states that want to enter into multi-state plans. So those are states that want to work together to reduce emissions, such as RGGI states, which is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a moment, which are states in the Northeast that have decided to work together to reduce carbon emissions. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to go over a little bit of what we think are suggested improvements for the Clean Power Plan. While we know it's critical to defend the Clean Power Plan and its important goals of reducing carbon emissions, we also know that we can strengthen the Clean Power Plan and that each state can actually chart its own path to a clean energy future and really maximize the use of renewables and energy efficiency. So we're going to suggest the following 4 improvements to the Clean Power Plan. Number 1 is to increase the overall carbon pollution reduction goals. We actually think we as a country can go much further, much faster to reduce carbon emissions in our energy sector. Number 2, which I've already discussed, is to really promote renewables and energy efficiency as the true solution to meeting our carbon reduction goals. Number 3 is to avoid the use of natural gas and nuclear, which we've already discussed, really are dangerous and dirty, and we don't need to rely on them if we're going to make real strides in climate change. And number 4 is we really want to empower affected workers and communities. And this is important when we talk about making this transition away from a fossil fuel-powered energy sector. We know that there are people's lives affected when, for example, a coal power plant is to shut down. And therefore, we want to work hand in hand with the unions and workers that are affected in those types of transitions. We also know that there are communities that are disproportionately impacted by the effects of climate change and impacted by local air pollution effects. And we think those communities should be represented in all of these stakeholder processes around the Clean Power Plan, and we want to elevate their voices. So next slide. So the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative I've just discussed is, and you can see in the lower right-hand corner of this slide, a number of states that are currently working together to reduce carbon emissions and have been doing so for some time. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative doesn't yet have a 2030 target, but groups like Environment Northeast have projected that they could actually reduce a lot more, and it could be on track to reach a target of likely 54.6 to million metric tons in 2030. And that actually, this is just an illustrative example to show that the Clean Power Plan could actually reduce, we could actually reduce even more emissions than are estimated in the Clean Power Plan. And also the Clean Power Plan doesn't take into account a lot of the laws to promote renewables and climate and reduce emissions. They're already on the books. States including California, Colorado, Connecticut, Minnesota, New York, New Mexico, and Washington are likely to extend their renewable portfolio standards beyond 2020. And currently Washington and Illinois are both working on possible climate legislation, legislation that has been introduced in their current legislative sessions. And Maryland and Pennsylvania are working to increase their renewable standards as well. So there's a lot more that we can get, and we actually believe that we can reduce carbon a lot faster and a lot more in the recent years by 2030. Next slide. I'd mentioned that renewables can do a lot more. And I wanted to give you some specific examples. This is going to get a little technical, but I wanted to explain how much the renewable technologies are changing right now. And this slide doesn't even represent some of the latest news. I think people have probably heard that we are going to install more solar this year than we have in any of the past years, and that there's going to be a lot more employment, I think a 20% increase in employment from solar installations of solar PV, rooftop PV as well. And, you know, EPA presented two options for evaluating new renewables in their plan for the Clean Power Plan. One was based on average renewable portfolio standards, and one was based on resource availability. And their modeling actually showed no new wind or solar after 2016 because of modeling limitations. So already here you can see that renewables were really underestimated in what EPA evaluated was possible. The base case, or the main case that EPA used to evaluate what could be done under the Clean Power Plan, had 8 gigawatts of solar installed in the U.S. in 2025. And just for comparison purposes, the DOE Sunshot goal is 302 gigawatts in 2030. So 8 gigawatts of solar versus 302 gigawatts. And so that's just showing right there that what DOE is saying is possible with solar is a lot more than what EPA evaluated. And we're also seeing unprecedented investments in storage and technology. So we really don't know what is truly possible with solar. And we think it probably could even go beyond that 302 gigawatts. And then for wind, the wind base case, which is that acronym BAU from EIA, was 76 gigawatts, while the wind vision goal is 225 gigawatts. So that just shows that wind can actually do a lot more as well. And it's possible that 76 gigawatts of wind will be installed by the end of 2015. So we see here that, again, wind has really been underestimated in EPA's evaluation of the Clean Power Plan. And you heard Catherine talk about the Union of Concerned Scientists and how they are estimating that we could get a lot more in terms of renewables under the Clean Power Plan. And the Sierra Club is working closely with them to make suggestions to the EPA on how to strengthen the Clean Power Plan. So in a nutshell, renewables can do a whole lot more than EPA has estimated. And that really should prevent the need for natural gas and nuclear. The next slide, if you could advance this, Kelly, talks about efficiency in the clean power plant. And efficiency can do a lot more as well. EPA set the annual state efficiency target at 1.5%. And you know, some state programs like Vermont have already showed that you can save more than 2% in terms of annual energy savings from efficiency. And EPA assumed efficiency savings from utility programs declined far more quickly than actual experience from these programs demonstrate. So we really think that this estimate of 1.5% in terms of efficiency is probably conservative, and states can probably do a lot more. And we know that we will need to be working closely with states to also evaluate, monitor, and verify the reductions that the states can get. But we think efficiency can do a lot more as well. Next slide. So I've already talked a little bit about how we want to avoid natural gas and nuclear. And I won't go into too much detail here because a lot of you already know that EPA should not be incentivizing the construction of new fossil fuel fired generation, including new natural gas. And a lot of you know the risks that are already very present and apparent from fracking. So we also really think EPA should consider the full life cycle emissions of environmental impacts of natural gas use. So we want to definitely avoid any additional natural gas. And EPA should also not encourage states to keep at-risk nuclear plants running. At-risk nuclear plants is a phrase that EPA used to talk about nuclear plants that may be retiring. We feel that that is probably the most dangerous point in the lifetime of a nuclear plant at the end of its life. And we don't think that it's reasonable to be incentivizing these plants to stay open. As we all know, if you look at life cycle emissions of carbon, nuclear power is far from carbon-free. Fossil fuels are used for uranium mining, processing, conversion, enrichment, transportation, construction of reactors, and trying to handle radioactive waste. So we know if we really look at the full footprint of nuclear that it is not carbon-free. So we want to avoid natural gas and nuclear. And the next slide, please. And I think we've discussed how we think that that could be done through renewables and efficiency. And there's some very good analyses, economic analyses, and energy modeling that we can share with you that will show that pathway is possible, that we don't need to be continuing to rely on nuclear or natural gas. This final slide is just to talk a little bit about the environmental and economic justice concerns when we talk about this transition to a clean energy economy. And I've discussed, EPA must give workers and affected communities the opportunity to engage throughout the process at the state level, and that's where a lot of you come in. I think it will be so important to have your voices as part of this process of representing the health community, and many of your voices are the voices that have been elevating communities that have been disproportionately impacted by pollution and currently may not have a voice in this process. So I think that would be a great thing for volunteers, PSR, to think about. The standard also must protect low-income and communities disproportionately impacted by pollution and should prioritize pollution reductions where they're needed most in pollution hotspots. And all of you know there are such things as areas where they're getting the disproportionate amount of pollution, and the last thing we should do is be exacerbating those hotspots. Sierra Club will be advocating for public resources to help workers and affected communities as we transition to a clean energy economy, and a clean energy economy that's free of pollution hotspots. So we really hope you'll join with us in that. So now I'll just turn to next steps, if I could have the next slide. Thank you, Kelly. Okay, so we recently heard an announcement from EPA that they will now be finalizing the existing source standard for existing power plants, the Clean Power Plan for existing power plants, in mid-summer. And they will also be finalizing the standard for new and modified power plants as well. So now we're looking at a mid-summer deadline for the final Clean Power Plan to be coming out. And at that same time, there will be a draft model federal plan released. And that plan will be going through a comment period, and there will be hearings on that model federal plan in fall of 2015. And for folks who don't know, that model federal plan will happen if a state decides not to turn in a plan, or an attorney general decides instead to sue the EPA. The EPA is then obligated under the Clean Air Act to give a plan to the state. And that is what that process is. We'll probably start seeing state plans due June 30th, 2016, or the summer of 2016. And then we'll see individual plans if they get a one-year extension in 2017. And we could even see some multi-state plans submitted into 2018. So this is all just to say that we have a process in front of us, a multi-year process, where your states will really be looking to you to get involved and be an expert and help chart the future for your state and the real transition to clean energy. So we really think it's a wonderful time for all of you to get involved and to raise your voices. So with that, I will end, and we can talk more about how you can get involved.
Thank you so much, Liz. Am I on? Can you hear me?
We can hear
Hello?
you.
Yes, you're on.
Okay, great. Thank you. At this point, I'd like to open it up, and if Julia, if you can get Barb's slides ready, I'd like to open it up to questions and answers from the audience who are out there. And if you're on the webinar now, you can use there's a little icon to raise your hand. And if folks can ask a question via that, Julia can make sure folks are unmuted, and we can go from there. And the way I'm actually set up, I'm having a difficult time. I can't see who's raised their hand or not. So, Julia, you might have to facilitate that. I don't have that access via my status.
Actually, Sarah, Via, you're unmuted. Go ahead and ask your question. Sarah, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, sorry,
Yes.
I forgot to unmute myself on this end. Okay, Liz mentioned that the Sierra Club would be sharing their models and all the information that she discussed so that we could have specifics in front of us to tell people how it is that this is going to work, that we can actually make our goals with renewables and we don't have to use natural gas. Because I've talked to people and said, well, there's a lot of information saying that because solar and wind are ramping up so rapidly that we can use these instead of natural gas or nuclear. And then people say, well, blah blah. Essentially show me the evidence. So I'd like to have a few concrete pieces of evidence that then I can respond and say, well, here's the evidence.
That's a great question and a great opportunity, I think. And I'm not sure which state you're in, we're working with partners to get better information and modeling out there into your hands. We're working with NRDC, Concerned Scientists, the World Resources Institute. So I think probably the best thing to do would be to connect you with one of our campaign experts in your state who can then provide you with some of the state analysis and bring you into that conversation and make sure you have some of the best information. And I think that's one of the ideas that we're working on with Kelly.
So another question that was put in the question box is by Michelle is, what is our role when we're in a state that's going to sue to not implement the ruling?
That's a great question as well. What we have been doing in those states where there is already an active attorney general lawsuit or the governor is threatening to sue, and I will preface that in some states you'll see the attorney general threatening to sue, but the state environment agency is actually moving forward to create a plan to comply with the Clean Power Plan. That actually is quite common. So they will still be holding stakeholder processes and reaching out to you even though there are threats to sue. So I would just say, even if you see those threats, stay engaged, stay active with that environment agency liaison so that you can stay engaged in those stakeholder processes. And I think the key messaging around that is to show how compliance with the Clean Power Plan and moving forward to transition to a clean energy future is what's best for the state, and just continue to move that forward even though the state attorney general may be threatening to sue.
Thanks, Liz. Another question came in from Teresa Mendez-Quigley in Philadelphia asking, will the state plans be implemented by the respective state environmental quality or protection agencies, or how will this happen?
Very good question. Currently, this is an unprecedented style of rulemaking. Traditionally, the implementation does rely on the Environment Agency to implement the process and submit the plan. The Environment Agency will submit the plan to the governor will approve of it, and then the plan will move forward to EPA. Most of the time, because there's such a strong energy element to these plans, the state is working with the state Public Service Commission or the energy commissions in your state. So the Environment Agency and the Energy Commission are working closely to come up with a plan together. So you probably will see them working together and holding joint stakeholder processes, and even maybe members of the governor's staff working with them to do that in this case. However, the actual legal implementation obligation is on the state environment agency.
Great. I've unmuted Sharad Malavad. I probably mispronounced your name if you want to ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So my question was, what if a state defaults and does not give a plan, is there a system built in to kind of have a penalty imposed or some sanctions imposed? I mean, what would be the compelling factor for a state to go ahead and actually do it, in addition to any incentives built therein?
That's a great question, and I mentioned that EPA will be coming out with a draft model federal plan, and that is also referred to as a federal implementation plan. If a state fails to comply and fails to submit a plan, EPA is obligated, excuse me, under the Clean Air Act to actually submit a federal plan for that state. And in that case, the EPA gets to decide the energy future and the future for that state. It is something that we believe is not in the state interest enough that they will choose instead to do their own state implementation plan. However, if that really does not happen, EPA will be able to enforce their own federal plan and make the state do it legally.
We've had quite a few questions asking about whether or not a federal carbon tax would, fulfill this plan, and wondered what your answer to that was, Liz.
Well, that's a great question as well. A federal tax would not be something a state could do under this plan. A state could choose to pass a state carbon tax or a carbon tax amongst many states and submit that as a part of their plan. If they can show that the state's carbon emissions will be reducing at the right level, it's a part of that tax. So there is room for something like a carbon tax or another type of approach that would make carbon reductions happen. A federal carbon tax, however, would be separate from this, and probably not, unless it would not involve the legal authority involved in this rulemaking.
Great, thank you. Given the time, there are still other questions. I wanted to announce that the full recording of this webinar will be sent out to everybody tomorrow. I'm sure that Liz will share her slides and the references that she used.
Happy to do that, and I'm also happy to work with Kelly to put you in touch with our state representatives who can help you with some of those specific references.
That's great, Liz. Thanks. And a lot of the organizations are working together. So there's Union of Concerned Scientists, Climate Organizers, Environment America. We have our own chapters at PSR who are working on solutions in their state for implementation. So you'll hear more about that as well. I'm going to let Barb take over. And if people want to keep asking questions, I can answer some in the question box.
Thank you, Catherine.
Hi, everybody.
I'd like to introduce.
This is
Go ahead, Barb.
I'm sorry, we're talking over each other. Hi, everybody. It's Barb Gottlieb with the PSR National Staff in Washington. I'd like to talk a little bit now about how we're going to take action to begin laying the groundwork and preparing the atmosphere for the positive, fruitful implementation of the Clean Power Plan. As Kelly mentioned earlier, President Obama said last night in his State of the Union address that no challenge poses a greater threat to future generations than climate change. That means that we face a really huge challenge to really make this come about. What we need is to have both the knowledge and then to go from knowledge to action. So PSR's Climate Health Action Teams will help you do both of these. In each of our monthly sessions, we'll have an expert presenter, like we've had the privilege of having Liz Pereira with us tonight. And we will be actually having expert presenters about the advances that have been made in solar power, the advances that have been made in energy efficiency, answering that earlier question about, show us the beef, what's the evidence. You'll be getting that kind of information on these webinars. You'll also be getting information about how to take that information into your community and use it to help build a positive energy future for our country. So let me tell you a little bit about these actions. We're going to be starting with simple actions like today's action, and then as we go through the months, as we become more familiar with this process, they'll begin to get more complex. Now, there will be some variation in how you apply the actions in your state. That's because, as Liz was pointing out, there's going to be variation from state to state in how the state will reach its carbon reduction goal. So different states have different goals. They'll be operating on slightly different timelines. There will be differences from state to state about what opposition you'll face, and you will, and also who your allies will be that you'll be working with. So in our future webinars, we'll go into all of that kind of detail, and we will be posting information on our website, and Kelly will be sending information to you that is state-specific. And then finally, Kelly is going to be working with our team leaders to get you hooked up with those allies in your state. But for tonight, we're starting with a much, much simpler action. The Clean Power Plan comes out of the Obama administration, and it's a reflection of President Obama's intention to be the climate president. I think that's wonderful, but as I think you know, a lot of people in Congress don't. His intense pushback from many states, and this pushback is going to take a number of different forms. It could be opposition from the governor. It could be legislation in the state legislature that would limit or defund or otherwise undermine the Clean Power Plan. In fact, we know this is already being planned in a number of states. So one of our tasks is to support the Clean Power Plan, to, as Liz said, to defend it, and to encourage President Obama to stand firm in his defense of it. To that end, we in PSR and our allies in Environment America and the Alliance of Nurses for Healthy Environment have prepared a sign-on letter for the President to be signed by health professionals. Its first message is thanking the President for his leadership on climate change and also, of course, for proposing this Clean Power Plan. So that's the first point in the letter. At the same time, as Liz was saying, it's really important that we strengthen the Clean Power Plan. So the letter also urges the President to use this nationwide opportunity not just to retire coal plants, but also to seize the potential for clean energy, that is, clean renewable energy sources like wind and solar and energy efficiency, to meet and exceed the goals of the plan. So that way energy generation will ensure healthier, cleaner air today and a more livable climate tomorrow. And then the third goal of the letter is to encourage the President not to opt, as Liz was saying, for natural gas or for nuclear power because they both harm health. So that's a quick outline of the letter. Here's what I'm asking you to do. For those of you who are on the call tonight who are health professionals, if you're a doctor, a nurse, a technician, they're all different kinds of health professionals, and we welcome all of you, as well as medical academics and medical researchers. Sign the letter. Very simple. We'll ask you to go to PSR's website, and then you'll find the letter on our website. Let me see if I can get you there right now. Okay, here's the home page of PSR's website. We have at the top of the page these rotating stories. You see this energy efficient house with passive solar and with solar panels. At the bottom of the text it says add your name to our sign-on letter. Just click there. Now this story won't remain at the top of our home page all the time, so we'll instead move it down to this point called in the spotlight right down here where my cursor is, and you'll be able to click right into our letter. So we'll encourage you to do that. Also, I'd like to ask you to use this letter as a way of recruiting more health professionals, either to join your Climate Health Action Team or to join PSR. So tomorrow we'll send you a copy of the letter that you'll be able to print out and take to your colleagues. So again, if you're a health professional, if you work in a hospital or a clinic or some other healthcare office, bring it to your staff and ask them to sign. If you work at a medical school, you can share it with your medical school professors or your dean. All of these people are welcome to sign the letter and then mail the letter back to PSR. And let me just, actually, I beg your pardon, pull up our address right here. You can scan the letter with a signature and email it to Kelly at kbenjamin@psr.org, or mail it to PSR. Here's our address. You'll also, of course, find it on our website. And while you're at it, invite them to join both your action team and to join PSR so that you're significantly strengthening our movement. Now, I know a lot of people on the phone aren't health professionals, and I'm going to ask you to do something just a little bit different. When we send you the letter, print it out, take it to a health professional you know, and ask them to sign. Take it to your doctor, to your dentist, to a nurse. Now, some of these people will sign and some of them won't. That's okay. Don't be upset if they say, I don't think that's appropriate for me, because some health professionals aren't quite with us. But even if they don't sign, by bringing them the letter, by sharing it with them, you're helping to educate them about climate change and about their responsibility as health professionals to protect you and their other patients from these major threats to human health and survival. So again, we'll ask you to collect those signatures and mail or email those signatures to us. The other thing you can do if you're not a health professional is to take this letter to your friends and neighbors. Show them what it's all about and ask them to join your action team So some of you, especially if you live in a state where there's a PSR chapter, might already have an action team in place. But I think a lot of you are on this call kind of on your own. You know, you're interested, you signed up, and we're delighted that you're here. Well, feel free to ask family members, neighbors, colleagues, people in your place of worship, folks on the green team at your school. They're all welcome. And I think that you'll find that having more people on your team will make your work easier and more effective. So feel free to use this letter as a way of explaining to them the kind of work we're doing, what the Clean Power Plan is all about, and why energy efficiency and renewable energy are so exciting to us. That's our action for this month. Once again, we'll send the letter out to you tomorrow. And in March, we and our allies will be presenting these signatures to the White House. That means we have 1.5 months, so please sign the letter yourself if you're a health professional. And whether you are or you're not, circulate this letter now and get those signatures back to us. And we'll be back next month with a new webinar and a new action. And I promise you that that one will not be for health professionals only. Okay, Kelly?
Hi, Barb. Thank you. I'd like to just spend a couple moments before we wrap up talking about actually how the teams will function. Over the course of the next week or so, I'm going to be emailing folks, and you'll be receiving an email from me regarding connecting with other folks in your state who are interested in working on raising the health voice on climate change and creating a concise and authoritative group of activists, climate health activists, who can educate their public, their community, and public representatives about the need to take action on climate change and the connection between climate change and health. You know, some states are planning on connecting via Google Groups, and I know other states are holding a separate conference call once a month. They've already been organizing, you know, and they've met each other. And I know in a state like Boston right now, there's a group assembled together right now in person in a room listening to this webinar. So just a shout out to Boston. Hello, thank you for being there. Thank you for doing this important work. But in other states, I know New York is planning a separate conference call, you know, once a month in their state, in addition to the National Climate Health Action Team meetings that we're holding. So we're doing one national webinar, one national online meeting a month, and then teams in their states are getting together outside of that to talk about ways to elevate the health voice in their states. So I just wanted to wrap up and remind folks that the letter that Bob talked about sending out will be emailed to everyone on this webinar by first thing tomorrow morning. We'll have it out in your inbox, and so that we can take action on this issue. And the upcoming webinar, again, we'll let folks know via email, and there also will be a list of the scheduled webinars on the PSR action team. So without further ado, I know it's just running a little bit over an hour. I want to thank everyone for being on. Thank you, Liz Pereira, for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to join us and help launch the climate action team that we hope will have a very large impact in 2015. And I'm hoping to see, you know, 2015, we saw last night with President Obama. This is a year where climate and public health, the connection is very crystal clear, and we're going to see movement in this area and get some solid gains via the Clean Power Plan. So thank you very much for attending this, and I look forward to speaking with all of you. Take care. Have a good evening.